59 cents is not a lot of money. I mean, I probably have 59 cents kicking around the floor of my car, but I'm just too lazy to pick it up. But in the right circumstances, 59 cents can be a lot of money. Prop 138 in Arizona will cut the wages of tipped workers by 59 cents. Not a huge number, but I'm betting none of us would willingly take that pay cut. But let's zoom out on this. Let's apply that 59-cent pay cut to every tipped worker in Arizona. And let's multiply that by the number of hours they would work in a year. That 59 cents suddenly becomes a much bigger number. How much bigger? $76 million a year bigger. I'll talk more about Prop 138 and how I got those numbers, but I want to start with a little glimpse of the insanity that went into the push to get Prop 138 on the ballot. There was a hearing on the bill that put Prop 138 on the ballot. At this hearing, anyone could come testify. So a bunch of lackeys for restaurant owners came and posed as everyday waiters, waitresses, and bartenders to tell state legislators that paying tipped workers less was actually a good thing. Then one of the state legislators asked one of these faux waiters and waitresses how much they made, to get a feel for what these waiters and waitresses get paid, just for informational purposes.
This might be a little personal, but I'm kind of wondering, what's the ballpark of how much you make a year? Because I'm trying to figure out what a tip worker kind of makes.
See, very friendly. Not a gotcha question at all. You were not ready for the answer this received.
I make roughly about $80,000 to $90,000 a year.
Okay.
And I work 32 hours a week.
You heard that right. $90,000 a year, working 32 hours a week. Oh, and she knew she messed up judging by her body language. What would possess someone to pretend to be an average waiter or waitress to try to trick people like that? And believe me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This all very much goes off the rails in ways you will not be able to predict. Because now we have to understand what's in Prop 138. So what is Prop 138? Well, a Republican helpfully explains it during a floor debate.
My understanding of what this bill does is that if you have a worker who is tipped, you can lower their base pay, but they get to keep the tips.
Tipped workers get a lower base wage, but they get to keep their tips. I couldn't have explained it better. By the way, that was from a supporter of the bill. We'll see him a little later, too. Prop 138 is a pay cut for workers. It does this by changing how the tip credit works. What's a tip credit? Well, if you are a worker that gets tips, like a bartender, waiter, or waitress, employers can pay you below the minimum wage if the tips get you above the minimum wage. For example, the federally mandated minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, and the federal tip minimum wage is $2.13 an hour. That means the tip credit is $5.12, and the worker must make that in tips per an hour to qualify for the employer to pay them $2.13 an hour. But things are different in Arizona. In Arizona, the minimum wage is $14.35 an hour. This is because back in 2006, Arizona approved Prop 202. Prop 202 pegged the minimum wage to inflation. So if inflation goes up, minimum wage goes up. But Prop 202 also did one other thing. It changed the tip credit to $3 below whatever the minimum wage was for Arizonans. In 2006, when this was passed, the minimum wage became $6.75 an hour. That means the tip minimum wage became $3.75 an hour. To show you why the Arizona Restaurant Association, the people responsible for Prop 138, are doing it, let's do a little light math. The tip credit at the federal level is around 70% of the minimum wage, meaning they can pay tipped workers 70% less than the minimum wage. In 2006, with the passage of Prop 202, the tip credit became 40% of the minimum wage in Arizona. A big improvement for tipped workers, but not as big as it is now. In the year of our Lord 2024, the tip credit is down to 20% of minimum wage. I think this is great. Big thumbs up. $3 tip credit tacked on to an inflation-indexed minimum wage essentially means that the tip credit is going to end up being irrelevant. Restaurant owners are going to basically be paying the actual minimum wage, more or less. But this is where the support for Prop 138 is coming from. Restaurant owners that don't want to pay their workers minimum wage. They want to pay workers less, or at least stop paying them more. So here's how they'll get that done with Prop 138. They scrap the $3 tip credit because having a static dollar amount erodes incredibly quickly with inflation. That static dollar amount will always become worthless over the long run. so they are going to substitute a percentage of the current minimum wage for that static amount. 25% of minimum wage is going to be the new tip credit. You can see why they did it. No more worries about inflation because the tip credit will always stay the same percentage, 25%. There is also one more part to Prop 138. In 2024, the average tipped worker makes the Arizona minimum wage minus $3, so $11.35 an hour plus tips. What's plus tips? How much is that? Well, waitstaff make $23.60 an hour and bartenders make $24.46, but let's go with the waitstaff number of $23.60. One, because there are more waitstaff than bartenders, and two, because we're just trying to establish the minimum level of impact here. By the way, all these numbers are from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in case you want to look it up. The reason I'm establishing a minimum baseline of impact here is there is another proviso to Prop 138. In order to offset the inherent meanness of cutting the wages of tipped workers, restaurant owners stuffed in a provision that wages plus tips must equal $2 above the minimum wage. Otherwise, the owners have to make up the difference. Not tipped minimum wage, actual minimum wage. So $16.35 in our current year. But as we've just seen, it's kind of irrelevant. We just established that the average worker gets paid $23.60 an hour. So this kind of does nothing for the average tipped worker. You may have already spotted another problem here. If the static $3 meant that the tip credit was going to be irrelevant soon, won't the same thing happen to this minimum wage plus $2 guaranteed? The answer is yes, yes, and further yeses. That's the point. This minimum wage plus $2 is on its face bad faith, meant only to exist as a shield against criticism. Of course, there's also a larger problem. Doesn't this depend upon restaurant owners and operators dealing in good faith with their workers? You know, the people who are notorious for not being trustworthy? And as we'll see soon, these people can definitely not be trusted. That $90,000 waitress is just the tip of the iceberg. Alright, only one more thing before we get to the Prop 138 hearing. What will be the impact of this change to the tip credit? And that's where the 59 cents comes from. That's where the $76 million comes from. The 59 cents is the difference between where the tipped minimum wage is under the current system versus where it would be under Prop 138. The tip minimum wage under the current system is $11.35, and it's $10.76 under the new system. 59 cents is the difference. That's the pay cut restaurant owners are trying to legalize. Alright, let's assume that the average worker works 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. Let's multiply that by 59 cents and we get $1,227. That's how much this change in the minimum wage is going to make in the average tip worker's salary. Now let's multiply that by the number of bartenders, waiters, and waitresses in Arizona. Again, this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And that's also how we get $76 million. That's why the Arizona Restaurant Association, the lobbying association for restaurant owners, is fighting for this 59-cent pay cut for their workers. This is free money they get to keep. But speaking of the Arizona Restaurant Association, or the ARA, it's time for the main event. The first and only committee hearing on this bill cutting wages for tipped workers in the Arizona Legislature. March 19th, 2024. You are not ready for this. I'm not ready for this. Let's do it anyway. We start with Steve Chucri. He's the head of the ARA, and he's here to sell the bill.
No one's wages are reduced. You could read there in the amendment, we are guaranteeing $2 more than the minimum wage right now. There's no reduction in anyone's salary. There's only an increase. It's very simple. So the conjecture, the poppycock about people are going to get less and less, and that restaurateurs are these big corporate giants that want to take away from our workers is completely false. And I say that with 23 years experience and with great conviction in that these are mom and pop operations. A majority of restaurants across our state, 65 to 70% are owned, they're family owned, they're small businesses, whereas 30 to 35 are chain restaurants.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there, Steve. I'm going to ignore the misrepresenting of what's in the bill because I just went through it in more detail than anyone else in this hearing ever will. It's a pay cut for workers. End of story. But mom and pop shops? Steve, let's not lie to the people. A simple analysis of the Arizona Restaurant Association Board of Directors, of which this guy is the president, shows this ain't a mom and pop operation. And by analysis, I mean just looking at it. You may be thinking the mom and pop part of mom and pop restaurants was a lie, but it's also the restaurant part of that equation. Ecolab, Crown Crescent Distributing, Twice, Coca-Cola, Heartland Payment Systems, Uber Eats, US Foods, and Southwest Gas. We're just a small mom and pop operation. Mom handles the kitchen, Pa handles the customers, and Southwest Gas handles the electrical grid. I mean, Uber Eats, Coca-Cola, Heartland Payment Systems? Why are they even there? What interest does a Coca-Cola bottler have with the Restaurant Association that they are on the board of directors? Are they family-owned? For God's sakes, when you actually get to the restaurants, there are 2 separate people from Outback Steakhouse on their board. We are not big chain restaurants, we're mom and pop operations. I've just listed half of their board and you can see that's a lie. You may be wondering right now if this level of dishonesty is going to permeate the whole hearing. Oh, you have no idea. Back to Steve Chucri.
But I think it's more important for this body to hear from the tipped worker. Ask them these questions because they're better going to advise and counsel you on their realities than I would.
Listen to the workers, he says, motioning to the workers behind him, who are all in matching Save Our Tips t-shirts. Not at all suspicious, very unscripted and spontaneous. But let's do what Steve Chucri, president of the Arizona Restaurant Association, says and listen to the 3 specific workers with which he says we should listen. First up, Jaime Sarli. She's here to talk about what effects expanding the tip credit would have.
I'm Jaime Sarli, and I work with Streets of New York. Like most restaurants, every time minimum wage is increased in general, we have to cut hours, raise menu prices, and eliminate some positions that help restaurants run smoother, such as bussers, hostesses, and food runners. I can't imagine with our labor percentage as it is right now, having restaurants pay minimum wage to servers as well.
Yeah, it's the $90,000 a year waitress. And that's a weird thing for a waitress to be talking about. I've worked a lot of food service jobs, and I've never heard someone say labor percentage before. Doesn't sound like something a tipped worker would say. At least not without a good amount of contempt in their voice. Say, remember that fun quote from before? Here it is again.
I make roughly about 80 to 90,000 a year.
Okay.
And I work 32 hours a week.
I'm going to have to confess I'm not familiar with too many waitresses that make $80,000 to $90,000 a year, especially when working 32 hours a week. Maybe I just need a bigger social circle, but I've got a good idea on how to reduce Jamie's labor percentage. She's in fact a assistant manager at a restaurant called Streets of New York. So if you are looking to reduce your labor percentage, maybe don't get paid $90,000 a year? Just an idea. Are you wondering how Jamie got here to testify? Well, the owner of Streets of New York is the vice chairman on the board of directors of the Arizona Restaurant Association, so it's not exactly a mystery. Also, did you see her hands after getting asked that question? Wonder why she's so nervous. But let's move on. I don't want to belabor the point that this isn't an average waitress. Her pay level says that. And I do want to honor Steve Chucri's request that we listen to the workers. So next man up, allow me to introduce you to Sultan Stipho.
My name is Sultan Stipho. I'm with White Chocolate Grill. I wanted to come up here and first tell my story, but being able to follow the gentleman that just passed me, who looks very, very sharp, I wanted to touch on the math that he just mentioned. If we do the math right now, the current minimum wage in Arizona is around $14.50, and the tipped wage for employees is $11.35. That's something that we can all agree on. If this were to pass today, to settle all the arguments we've been having, the servers would be getting paid more than they are right now in their minimum wage. So before we make this agreement back and forth, we can all do the math together if we have a calculator in front of us.
I hate math.
If you want to join us. Otherwise, I just want to make it clear because that's the way the math shows on our side.
Sure.
I'm not really sure what to say to this. The current tip minimum wage is $11.35. Under the new system, it's $10.76. It's very clearly less than what it currently is. I'm not sure Sultan can do math, but let's hear him out. He waved a calculator around and said, let's do the math, so let's do the math. Oh, so he did no actual math during the rest of his testimony. Ugh. Considering this is mostly math-based, this doesn't bode well, but maybe he says something during the rest of his testimony that impacts this discussion. Maybe something from his life story that'll contribute to his feelings on the matter.
Yeah, I'm 22 years old. I hope to go to college one day, go to law school one day.
I'm sorry, you hope to go to college one day? Sultan's been a student at Arizona State University since 2021. I know this because it's on his LinkedIn page. Right below his job title, head server at White Chocolate Grill, which I'm assuming is not an entry-level position. And in case you are wondering, the owner of the White Chocolate Grill is a former chairman at the Arizona Restaurant Association Board of Directors. I feel like I'm being gaslit here. We got Sultan not knowing how to do math and pretending that he's some sort of poor college aspirant when he's been a student for 3 years, and a pretty successful student at that, because that LinkedIn screenshot is from 6 months ago. This one from last week is even more interesting. Sultan's been downgraded to a bartender at the White Chocolate Grill. Bummer for him, but he does have an interesting new second job. Since 2023, he's apparently been a law clerk at Doran Justice. In other words, during this hearing, while he's talking about hoping to go to college one day, he is in fact a law clerk, at least according to him and his LinkedIn account. Okay. So, 2 of the tipped workers that Steve Chucri recommended have turned out to be a waitress who works 32 hours a week and makes $40 an hour, and a math-averse law clerk. And both have direct connections to the Arizona Restaurant Association Board of Directors. In other words, they're industry plants. So let's just go to the third worker from the Save Our Tips group. Maybe she will be the average waitress who will set us straight. She'll be the person to make an honest case for this increase of the tip credit. You are so not ready for what's next. Say hello to Beth Cochran.
My name is Beth Cochran. I'm with Snooze AM Eatery. I have a very unique perspective because I've been an hourly employee as well as now on the management side. The margins that restaurants have to face, 2 biggest areas are labor and cost of goods. The amount of dollars spent to be able to hire the best of the best, train the best of the best, keep and retain the best of the best are those, just like Jaime was saying, I have seen multiple examples of people that have made the hospitality industry their career as a career rather than going through the normal stages. And we have such a unique industry that allows transient employees to come in and come out of it at any given time.
Sure, absolutely the top concern of any average tip worker coming before the state legislature would be the cost of goods sold and the treatment of transient workers. I'm glad she brought it up. Is anyone else getting a corporate vibe from her? I mean, she said she's on the management side. What does that mean? Like an assistant manager or head server like Jaime or Sultan? Or does it mean something else? Well, maybe this clip from radio station KEZ from 8 years ago will help set us straight.
Oh, excuse me, you caught me drinking again. Hi, I'm here with 2 lovely ladies from Snooze. On your way left is Corey Sharp, Assistant General Manager of the Gilbert Snooze, and then the Arizona Regional Manager, Beth Cochran, is here.
A regional manager? That may sound bad to you, because it is, but it's actually way worse. According to her LinkedIn page, she's actually a vice president at Snooze AM Eatery. Which explains why Beth Cochran was doing all that corporate speak when she got to the podium. I mean, executives are going to talk like executives, right? We're probably lucky she didn't say this was a win-win situation, or that she was going to circle back to something. Now, you're probably wondering what Beth's connection to the Arizona Restaurant Association Board of Directors is, right? Jaime was a highly paid employee of the current vice chairwoman. Sultan was an employee of the former chairman of the board. So what's Beth's link to the board? Because there's no way it's just those 2. 3 Save Our Tips workers came up, and only 2 of them are directly connected to the board of directors? Fat chance. So what's Beth's connection? She's actually on it. That's right, one of the people Steve Chucri pointed out and said, listen to these people, they're the real workers, is actually on his board of directors. She's not a real worker, she's a VP on the board of directors arguing that her workers should get paid less while pretending to be a waitress. Save Our Tips. When was the last time this fraud got a tip? By the way, the number 2 man at the ARA got up after all of that and had the temerity to say this.
I'm going to try to keep it short. I think that you really should just listen to the workers that are here, right? And I know that you've heard from a couple that were on the other side.
Listen to the workers, he says. Which ones? The one that makes $90,000 a year? The law clerk at Door and Justice? Or the vice president pretending to be a waitress? Christ. But that's not where this freak show of a hearing ended, because I haven't touched on the Republicans pushing this nonsense bill. They didn't have any really tough questions when the Arizona Restaurant Association and their Save Our Tips goon squad was up. Why would they? They are on the same side. Pat on the head, keep going. But the moment real waiters and waitresses started testifying, their claws came out. For example, a unionized waitress who worked at the airport came up to testify about how this bill would affect her and her co-workers.
My name is Michelle Hornstein. I am with Unite Here, Local 11. I'm a server in Sky Harbor Airport. I'm here to urge you to vote no on SCR 1040. This legislation claims to help protect tipped workers, but it honestly will negatively impact us over time. The company that I work for had a 38% increase in revenue since 2022. But according to a recent company financial report, but my coworkers and I are still struggling to meet basic needs.
Solid comments from someone who would actually be affected by this bill versus the vice president, the law clerk, and the $90,000 a year waitress. These are big companies, and they are doing fine and don't need a handout on the back of workers. Now let's see how Republicans on the committee reacted to this.
I do think that the airport is different than all of the other restaurants, and I understand that Ms. Hornstein was standing up for everybody else, although they were shaking their head and they didn't want you to stand up for them because they're very happy with their current state of play.
The creep deciding who does and who doesn't get to speak for workers is Matt Gress. If I had to put a finger on someone who probably knew that there were a bunch of plants pretending to be tipped workers, he'd be the person. He's got a lot of connections to the business community. But you know what? That's not a good picture of him. Let's see if I have a better one available. Oh yes, that's a lovely picture of him after the hearing posing with the vice president of Snooze AM Eatery and a board member of the Arizona Restaurant Association. Beth Cochran, remember her? See, I told you he had connections to the business community. Look at all their lovely smiles. I wonder if they went out for drinks after fooling everyone. Save our tips. More like save our profits. Bunch of rich assholes. And the rest of the Republicans on the committee weren't much better.
Because if you don't like the guy, don't work there. If you're not making enough money doing your tips or getting to the tips, don't work there. You can go somewhere else and make a lot of money.
You'll have to forgive State House Representative Michael Carbone. He just saw a waitress and started to yell uncontrollably. I suppose we should be grateful he stayed on topic and didn't start screaming to see a manager. Which is funny because we've already seen at least 2. Any other Republicans want to weigh in on this?
In this case, it seems to me that except for some of the unions and activist groups that have spoken, it's clear the employees are happy with the situation as it is and want this bill, and the employers want this bill. I don't see any reason why the legislature should be injecting itself in to a system that is working for almost everyone who's there when no one is harmed in any way by this.
Yeah, that was the consensus of Republicans on the committee. The fake workers are the real ones and everyone else is just a union plant. Also, if you pass a bill that changes the current status, you are getting involved. I don't know what to tell you. Cutting wages is not the status quo, it's just an action in favor of the owners and management. Let's try the chairman of the committee. Maybe he'll do a slightly better job.
To folks that complain about their situations, just like in the movie A Knight's Tale, you can change your own stars. You don't have to keep doing what you're doing, kids.
They came before you and asked you not to cut their wages, and you quoted A Knight's Tale at them. Why? Did you not have any Backstreet Boys lyrics to quote at them? This hearing has been kinda dark. Do you have any sections from your Twilight fanfic you'd like to quote to lighten the mood? You know what? Republicans are a lost cause here. Let's see what the Democrats have.
So we have people out in the community collecting petition signatures for one thing, right? It's one of the beautiful things about the state of Arizona is that we do allow direct democracy through the ballot initiative process. And then we have the powerful restaurant lobby see what's happening and come to the legislature and ask our Republican-controlled legislature to put yet another ballot referral, which I think the ballot's going to be about 3 pages now, on the ballot to combat that petition, the citizens' petition drive. So I first just think that that is not how we should do business down here, and this is being driven by lobbyists, and I want us to remember that. When we talk about the minimum wage and how much workers have been hurt historically in this state, it was a citizens' ballot initiative that passed the minimum wage protections that we have in this state right now. And that was combated by the same interests who are here today, claiming that they care about workers.
Good. Throw that in their faces. Let everyone know that even though the Democrats on the committee didn't know the extent of what was happening, they knew it was a sham process run by the Arizona Restaurant Association. Now that someone's actually called out this nonsense, let's see how the chairman of this committee responds.
The next thing, the striker pushed by lobbyists. Apparently not the chairman of this committee. I would warn people on this committee to not impugn, directly or otherwise, their motives on running a striker. That's just everybody that can hear me.
Wow, tough talk from somebody who wistfully quotes A Knight's Tale. But she's telling it like it is, and I can prove it. You see, the Republicans on this committee don't know what's in the bill. The bill just got shoved in front of them, and they voted yes. Back when Chucri, the head of the ARA, was testifying, it became painfully clear most of them didn't know what was in the bill and hadn't read it. For example, this guy.
This resolution would send to the voters a question on minimum wages and tips, and I'm wondering, isn't this the current law, though?
God, I love Neil Carter. So dumb. So dumb. Every time he pops up, it's a little treat just for me. He doesn't have a clue what's in the bill or what the current law is. He's just happy to be here and ready to vote for whatever's in the bill. But he's not the only dummy who's voting for the bill who doesn't know what's in it. Guess who else doesn't have a clue?
You just said, sir, that the current tipped minimum wage for servers is 11 something an hour?
Is 11.35.
And it would go up to 13 something with this?
You know, Wilmeth would know these things if he read the bill before he showed up to his committee hearing, like a real lawmaker, or just someone concerned with the process. Hell, you don't even have to read the bill itself, just read summaries of the bill. But instead he showed up to the hearing without a clue what was going on or what was in the bill, but really willing to vote yes on whatever was put in front of him. And he had the gall to say this.
The next thing, the striker pushed by lobbyists. Apparently not the chairman of this committee. I would warn people on this committee to not impugn, directly or otherwise, their motives on running a striker. That's just everybody that can hear me.
Yeah, considering the parade of lies, tricks, and deceit that just unfolded, which Wilmeth seems remarkably unbothered by, I'm going to assume lobbyists run this and any other committee he's on. Maybe he should spend less time watching A Knight's Tale and more time doing his job. Anyway, the bill passed, but between passing out of committee and being passed by the legislature, someone did a little digging on the Save Our Tips people, and you'll never guess what they came up with. Why, it turns out that Save Our Tips was a front group, completely controlled and organized by the Arizona Restaurant Association. I know, I'm shocked too. In fact, you want to see the president of Save Our Tips? It's this guy.
But I think it's more important for this body to hear from the tipped worker. Ask them these questions, because they're better going to advise and counsel you on their realities than I would.
Yeah, while he was running his mouth about listening to the workers, he was making sure the only workers who got heard were his hand-picked plants. He's not exactly someone I would trust to have the best interests of the workers in mind. Oh, but that's not the only media story that came out. We also got this.
America Votes, Arizona's minimum wage could be on your ballot again this November, and this time more than once. We know this impacts a lot of you, and it could have a big impact if you work for tips. Manuelita Beck with our political team is finding out what's in those proposals.
I love restaurants, and so being able to be part of one is always really cool. I like talking to people, and so you meet all kinds of people throughout your day.
If you have a low opinion of local TV news, congratulations, that opinion just got validated. Yeah, some reporter at a TV station just randomly happened to stumble across Sultan Stipho. They then proceeded to interview him about the exact subject he had just testified to the state legislature about as part of a front group, without identifying him as such, and quoted him a number of times. Steve Chucri also appeared in this piece, so it's not really a mystery how Sultan got on TV. Apparently getting a lackey on TV is remarkably easy when you have no standards. Anyway, the legislature passed the bill, and now there's going to be a vote on Prop 138. Late edition here, but I just checked the Save Our Tips website that the Arizona Restaurant Association has, and it's recently been updated. The old version was basically a copy-pasted version of the one from New Mexico with stock photos that was nearly 10 years old. The new version is very different, and it has some fun Easter eggs. First of all, top testimonials from a guy called Sultan S. I wonder who this mysterious person could be. Is it possibly a person who currently identifies as a law clerk at the law firm of Doran Justice? Also, is somebody else in the media going to interview this guy? And if so, could they possibly identify him as being part of a front group? Just asking questions. Second, when you click the Get Involved link on the page, it takes you to this. Yes, that's the picture from earlier with Matt Gress. And there's Sultan, there's Jaime, and there's Beth Cochran, VP at Snooze Eatery and member of the Arizona Restaurant Association Board of Directors. And it's all captioned by the heading, "There are numerous ways you can support Prop 138, from donating to the campaign to doing interviews and sharing on social media. Now is the time for tip workers to unite to save tipping." What's that supposed to mean? One of the people up in your header is the VP of a chain restaurant. When's the last tip she got? Also, is Arizona State Rep Matt Gress part of Save Our Tips? Does he approve of pretending to be a waitress to trick legislators into voting for a bill to cut their wages? I have so many questions. For example, were there no other pictures of the Save Our Tips group in the shirts? Did you not take a better group photo at another time? Or since Beth Cochran's at the end, why not edit her out since she's so damaging to the message of solidarity with low-wage workers? I have so many questions. But let's go to the third and final Easter egg. One of the pictures they use is of Jaime Sarli testifying, which is odd on a number of levels, especially since it's just a screen grab from the hearing. Were they too cheap to even hire a photographer to get a better picture? Why are they so broke? But the level I find this most interesting at is not her particularly, but what's behind her. See that? It's Steve Chucri, head of the ARA and Save Our Tips, sneering in the background. Literally and metaphorically positioned as a puppet master, I could not imagine a worse picture of him. I could also not imagine a more appropriate picture either. Having made all those jokes, at the end of the video, I regret to inform you that Prop 138 is probably going to pass. How is that possible, you might ask? I just explained to you why Prop 138 is bad and the large number of lies told by the ARA while trying to get it on the ballot. Both should be disqualifying. Well, yes, both of those things are true, but they are also irrelevant. The media never really picked up this story, instead glossing it over like they always do, leaving the truth to get reported by small independent outlets like the Arizona Mirror, while big stations like ABC 15 put on industry puppets to spout lies, or worse, just did a surface-level he said, she said coverage of the story and moved on. So all these controversies never really entered the popular consciousness. But the worst part is how Arizona voters are going to see this on the ballot. The Tipped Worker Protection Act. That's right, the first time people are likely going to hear about this ballot initiative is when they read the words Tipped Worker Protection Act on their ballot. And most people, being good but uninformed of the minutiae, are going to vote for it. Because who doesn't want to protect tipped workers? And you might think it should be illegal to be that misleading on a ballot initiative. Well, the Republican-dominated Arizona Supreme Court disagrees. They rubber-stamped the title and denied all appeals. I wish I had a better note to end the video on, but it is what it is. Rich people bought politicians, and most of the media is just too uninterested or uninformed to cover it. And even when voters get to weigh in on the process, it's rigged by having the wording be incredibly misleading. I'm History Sock, and vote against cutting the wages of tipped workers and Prop 138. And screw the Arizona Restaurant Association.